Welcome back to another episode of Palisade Radio. This is your host, Colin Cattell. Returning guest on the program with us today is Willem Middelkoop. He's the founder and CEO of Commodity Discovery Fund. Willem is talking to us from Beijing, of all places, today. Willem, welcome back to the program.
Yeah, thanks. It's 11 p.m. here at night, but great to be back on your show.
Yeah, well, thank you for staying up and addressing our audience again. What brings you to Beijing?
Well, actually, it's a stopover because I'm on my way to Sydney. There's a new resource conference in Sydney next week. They invited me to fly over to talk about our investments into the Pilbara. There's this exciting gold discovery play where the gold-bearing conglomerates are giving some pretty nice results, and we see a lot of interest. We invested quite a bit of our money. We invested 20% of our fund actually into the Pilbara play. We're heavily invested into Novo and Artemis and De Grey, some other companies. But I had to stop over here in Beijing because a few of my books have been translated into Mandarin. So I have two publishers here in Beijing. I wanted to meet up with them. I'm speaking to them about a new book project. So that's the story.
Excellent. Well, congrats on your continued success with the publishing. Let's talk about the Pilbara region a bit. A 20% allocation is obviously a huge vote of confidence in what's being discovered in that part of the world. There is still quite a bit of skepticism because this deposit or these types of deposits are not easy to define necessarily based on your typical drill out a hard rock deposit and estimate how much gold is there. And so that's leaving quite a bit of investors on the sidelines and skeptical still. What's going to change that?
Yeah, and that's great because if there's, with all this skepticism, the valuations are still quite low. Novo Resources, of course, is valued quite rich, valuation of $800 million. But of course, they own 90% of the land involved. But you have a few other, especially the Australian listed companies like Artemis and De Grey. And if you look at the enterprise values of these companies, it's less than 100 million. And actually, we had some nice M&A activity last week. Of course, we're not the only ones putting quite a bit of money into Down Under, but we've seen Eric Sprott and Kirkland Lake, and of course Eric Sprott, he's the chairman of Kirkland Lake Gold, and I think they've invested in total around $150 million into this play. So Eric Sprott is a big believer, Kirkland Lake Gold is a big believer. We're waiting for the first bulk sample results. They could arrive next week. I wouldn't be surprised when they will surprise many investors to the upside. These conglomerates are they have a very high grade gold content. There's a lot of nuggets, so it's very difficult to calculate the overall resource. So we've seen some. It all takes a little longer than expected, so we've seen a huge correction, and I think valuations are now very interesting, especially for the companies I mentioned who are listed in Australia and North American investors. They can't buy the Australian stocks, so they're not interested in them. They don't follow them, and that brings a wonderful arbitrage opportunity for us.
Artemis and Novo are the two most recognized exploration companies in the basin, but like any new gold discovery, there's been a rush of staking and new companies trying to get into the basin there. If you talk to somebody like Eric Sprott, he would tell you that Novo has 70 to 80% of what he deems the important ground. That's, of course, a little bit skewed with him being the largest owner of Novo. But what is your read on how many players actually have a proper ground package in that area?
Actually, there are 5 companies which are really the top 5, and one is Novo. of course, Quinton Henning, he has taken so much land very early on when he started to understand how large the system could be. And we have more and more signs pointing to a very large gold system, comparable in size to maybe the Witwatersrand in South Africa. Number two is Artemis. Artemis has been active in this area before the discovery of the gold conglomerate. So their land package was really quite large before this all started, and they bought some extra tenements. Then we have De Grey. I think this the third biggest exploration company. They have a huge land package, also accumulated before this all started. So this is a new story for them. But most of their land doesn't have the gold-bearing conglomerates, but they are interesting because they also have a nice lithium discovery, and they have some permits to produce gold. And then we have Kairos. Kairos has a large land package, also Australian listed, and then we have DJO. So then we get into the smaller companies. But if we compare this discovery story, and I've been reading a lot, actually I've been reading two very old books on the South African conglomerate discoveries 150 years ago, and the similarities are striking. Average gold grade in South Africa in the Wits was around 10 grams per ton. If we look at all these samples we have now from the gold-bearing conglomerates in Australia, we have an average of 10 to 15 grams per ton. Of course, the bulk sample results will be most interesting to watch. If the bulk sample results will show double-digit grades, I think we'll see very strong interest again into this play.
Willem, speaking for the broader gold exploration market, do you think that success coming out of companies like Novo and Artemis has the ability to drive a very broad market, something like we saw from money rushing into Bre-X in the 90s?
Yeah, I think this could be it. I've been active in what I call discovery investing for 15 years now. I started as a private investor in 2002, 2003. Started a fund in 2008, and I've always said to myself and others in our company and to investors, one day we'll see a huge discovery which will wake the whole investment crowd and also the general investment crowd who's not following resource stocks now. And I think this could be the one, and because the similarities are so large. I studied the South African gold discoveries from the 1880s a lot now, and there's so many similarities. So we have so much evidence already that this is a district scale gold system. It's more than a district scale. If you look at the size, east-west, it's 300 kilometers. North-south, it's 250 kilometers. Well, I think not all of this land package will be mineralized, but we do have the evidence that the gold-bearing structures, the gold-bearing conglomerates, they run for tens of kilometers. And the first indications are that Novo and Artemis on the conglomerates they follow now, which are outcropping over around 8 to 10 kilometers, you will have a resource there which will give tens of millions of ounces. And of course, it still has to be confirmed, but all indications are that this is a very large and very rich system. And if you look at the total valuation of all companies involved, total valuation, market caps of all companies involved who own all the land is less than 1 billion. So we're just starting.
Absolutely. Well, last question on the Pilbara before we move on. You named 5 companies that you feel are relevant in the region. Is that 5 companies that you've invested in via the fund, or are you focused on a smaller number of those?
No, we invested in all of those 5 companies. Actually, we have a little more. We also have a position in Impact Minerals. It's also Australian listed. It's led by a PhD geologist who has a lot of knowledge in this field and built himself quite a nice land package, especially on the east side of the Pilbara. And of course, there are some Canadian names popping up now. We have seen some M&A activity. Pecton Gold, I think, was just listed. They just did a private placement also with Eric Sprott. They had a private placement the size of $5 million, I think. It's listed in North America. We saw a huge run in their shares last week. Even the guys of Next Gen Energy, they have Next Gold now, who also bought a stake in the Pilbara. They're listed in North America. But these are smaller companies for us. And actually, we don't have a position in Pecten, and we don't have a position in Next Gold as well.
Continuing on the line of thought of M&A and activity within the sector, talk to us about what's just unfolding with the Nevsun story.
Yeah, Nevsun's story is very interesting. Of course, we had a large discovery a few years ago by Reservoir Minerals. They discovered a huge copper gold project in Serbia, the Timok project. It was bought by Nevsun a few years ago, but especially Lucas Lundin, he has always kept his eyes on this project. And actually last week we were surprised by a takeover proposal from Lundin Mining together with Eurosun, and they're offering $1.5 billion for Nevsun. Nevsun has rejected this offer. They think it's inadequate. This offer doesn't give enough value to the overall company, and they think the structure which is being proposed is problematic. So I expect that a new offer will be made, and we could see a bidding war later this summer. So there's a very interesting situation to follow.
Another name that you brought up, Willem, in our discussion prior to the call is ShoGold, which is, I believe, a company we spoke about on the last interview we did.
Yeah, SolGold is working on an amazing discovery in Ecuador. It's the largest copper discovery in Latin America. And, well, I've seen a Reuters story. When I spoke to you, what was it, a few months back, I said that I wouldn't be surprised to see a bidding war around SolGold maybe this summer. And I was surprised to see a story by Reuters last month, and this story was talking about the many majors which are interested into SolGold now, and I think they mentioned a dozen majors looking at SolGold. And what's interesting in this play is that SolGold is drilling a second target now, Aguinaga target, and the first indications are this is a mineralized system as well. It has to be confirmed, the depth and that the size is good enough and the grade is good enough. But when Aguinaga turns out to be a second discovery, SolGold is proving that this is a district scale discovery. If you look at the maps, you can find them in the presentation by SolGold on the website. There's so many targets which still need to be drilled and have the same geophysical footprint as the first discovery, Alpala, which is a huge copper gold discovery already. So there's a very interesting situation to watch. The great thing is SolGold is very cheap. It came down quite a bit in the last 6-7 months. So I think it's a great buy at this level.
And I believe the ticker on SolGold is SOLG on the Toronto, just for people curious. Willem, let's talk a couple points, just more macro focused. Last time we had you on, of course, we talked about the fact that the general equities are valued quite highly relative to the gold stocks. What are you seeing playing out between there?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's an interesting fight. Commodities are priced very low, valued very low. General market is priced very high. So I expect to see some more sector rotation. And of course, everybody in our industry is looking at the gold price, waiting for a break to the upside. If we can break 1370 or even 1400, I think the big rally will start in precious metals related stocks. This will be a second phase of recovery after the first phase we saw in 2016. But I wouldn't be surprised to see one more move down first. So let's say a break to the downside, which scares everybody out again. It could be a false breakout down. And then we could see a turn of the market and a very violent move upwards again. And I follow quite a number of analysts who all analyze the market from a different point of view. You have the Elliott wave analyst, you have the cycle analyst, and even analysts like Martin Armstrong. And they all point to a very strong rally for gold from 2019 onwards. So we might get one more move down, but then I expect a very strong move up in 2019, 2020, and this could bring us back to $2,000 and even much higher.
Within the gold sector itself, I feel the same way, that there's a lot of positive sentiment towards a breakout to the upside. But if you look at the general public and the type of people that would start to be drawn in to buy gold as we go back towards 2000, it seems that there's just absolutely no coverage, no interest, despite the fact that the chart on gold the last year looks really solid and ready for a takeoff. Is that something that you've looked at? What do you feel the general sentiment is?
Yeah, I always look at what the general investors do, and as you know, the general investment funds, they hardly have any gold investments, they hardly have any commodity investments. But you see the first signs of a change. Goldman Sachs became very positive on commodities and even gold. I think we have a few problems ahead of us. We could even enter a new financial crisis, given the large amount of debt. Now interest rates are rising rapidly in the US. I think this has to do with the fact that Japan and China stopped buying US treasuries. So we could see some larger moves and changes which will bring money from more general funds into the precious metals and commodity sector. And then one or two big discoveries could help to improve this interest. And if we have some real serious money coming in from the more general funds, this is needed to really start a big bull market again.
Excellent. Well, Willem, thank you so much for coming back on the program with us. We will get you back on here in the next couple months when you are available, and have a very safe and fruitful trip to Australia.
Thanks, Colin.
Think you understand the junior mining sector, and you think that the participants in the mining sector, junior mining sector, are good people and kind people, hit the bid.
How violent that term could be, it actually could be quite violent. It could be a rip-your-face-off uranium rally.
And the world is always going to need raw materials. It's going to need copper and gold and nickel and so forth.
Totally destabilized. Hey, Troll, did you hear what's going on in Yemen?